Welcome to the Wally Report.
Listen, we are back for another amazing, exciting episode of the Wally Report, and this time we're joined by an extraordinary guest. He is a creator, showrunner, director, writer, and producer. You will know him from his work on Sopranos, Damages, Bloodline, and his new show, The New Look. Not only is he super talented, but he is also a fantastic guy. So please welcome in Todd Kessler. Todd, how are you, my man? So good to have you here.
I am fantastic. I have one big question to start for you. I know you're going to ask me a lot of questions, but
Yes.
are there lyrics to the theme song, to the Wally Report
No.
theme song? Can we write
No,
them?
but
Can we write them?
it's not a bad. You like that song?
Yeah, great song. Great song. We
I
got to
know.
write
Yeah.
them.
Listen, I got it off, just a random site, and so I needed something hot, and it just stuck. And I'm like, I actually kind of dig this song, so we could work on that for sure.
It's got a groove, and I'm on it. I'm on it.
So this is before we get into all the questions, because I do have a lot here. One big thing I wanted to bring up from the beginning is this is an exciting change for us here at the Wally Report, because I've done a lot of actors, and yes, you've done a little acting, obviously, in Damages, right? But this is a different. Now we're going to get the behind the scenes, the writing, the creation, all this other stuff. So I'm very excited about the different perspective that you're going to bring to all the viewers here, right? It's going to be a new riveting thing for the audience. So, but before we get to all your work and all this amazing stuff, I like to, I'm a big history guy. I got to start with the chronology of your life here, okay? So, and this is something I didn't know. So you grew up, and correct me if I'm wrong because I did some research here, the Detroit area. Am I right with this assumption?
Correct.
Okay. And did you stay, was it all your childhood there? Was it, and then you stayed through high school?
I was born in New York City and
Okay.
moved at a very young age. It wasn't me. I was moved, put it this way. I was moved at a
Right.
very young age to suburban Detroit
Okay. Okay.
and stayed through high school. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So during your childhood and the formative years, if you will, right? What were key influences that got you into, wanting to write or playwright or sort of into the show business? Was it certain movies, TV shows, actors? Was it people in your family? What were your early influences?
The A Team.
Oh yeah,
Mr. T.
Mr. T.
How could you not, as a child growing up under the influence of Mr. T, how could you not hope one day to potentially write for Mr. T on the A Team?
I'm a little bit young but I remember as a kid, A Team was massive in the 80s. So I do remember that was huge. So that makes sense.
And then on a different level, I think sometimes I think I became I think my dad likes to tell stories, and for the most part, his stories are terrible, meaning they have no structure. So there'll be like a beginning and somewhat of a middle and then just no end. So I was like, is there any more? And he would say, no, that's it. And I kept feeling that's not a story. Or there would just be half of a middle and an end, but no beginning. And so I think growing up under the influence of his storytelling unintentionally made me desire to tell a better story.
That's pretty fantastic because you're trying, hey, let me finish the story for you almost. Let me perfect that story that you butchered.
So
Interesting.
I think my hope, I have a son who turns 5 tomorrow, and my hope is that I'm such a terrible musician, even though I love playing music, that he'll become a great musician because he'll just be like, Dad, just let me do it. And then he'll pick up the guitar or the harmonica or the bass and be great. So
that's funny that you say that, because part of why I started this podcast is because we have the gift of gab in our family somewhat, as you know, because Tate, and you probably met his mother at some point, right?
Yeah.
And I've hopefully got some of that, and I wanted to pass it down to my son so that's why I'm kind of starting the podcast, so we can see it at an early age and then use hopefully he'll get the family jewels, if you will. So, okay, in high school though, before we get to your crazy college experience, which I was also amazed by, Did you already start working in plays in high school? Did that begin then?
It did. I started really early high school writing short stories. I really had a deep love for short stories. So I started writing short stories, and I was acting at the time and writing plays. And by my senior year of high school, was directing, acting, and writing plays. So yeah, that was birth
Wow.
in high school.
Okay, so you knew now you were into this type of work. You're excited, and this is okay. So this blew me away here. I didn't know about the whole Harvard thing, and I'm sure you get the cliche. Oh my God, Harvard. So you go to Harvard. You got a degree. Let me make sure I got this right. Dramatic literature and playwriting.
Correct.
Okay. So how was this whole experience of getting in and going there? Because obviously everybody dreams of such a thing.
Well, it was different than most experiences, I would say, because I ended up when I got in, I wanted to write a play for my thesis and direct it, and I was not allowed to in the English department. So the reason why my degree says dramatic literature and playwriting is they allow a small percentage of students once you're there to create their own majors if there isn't
Hmm.
something that they cover. So it became a very uh, tailored or customized or curated major because I was creating my own reading lists and finding professors to lead me through classes that were just one-on-one. So it was really a unique experience to not only create my own reading list and realize that if I'm not going to read something that I put on my own reading list, so in the majority of classes, it was just trying to do enough to get by and get a decent, grade. And this was if I'm going to skip over things that I selected, what am I doing? And it really turned my head around for what education is, because part of the goal of education is to be able to teach yourself how to educate yourself, in my opinion, for the rest of your life. So it was amazing, and in that the years that I was there, Spike Lee came out to teach a screenwriting seminar. A playwright named David Rabe came out to direct a play that he had written, and I was his assistant and then assistant director on the play. And he was the first professional writer that I had ever met. That was my junior year, and then Spike taught a screenwriting class my senior year, and so I ended up having a lot of access to people who left an indelible mark on my desire to write and also helped my career tremendously.
And you segued perfectly into my next line of questioning was that the David Rabe situation and then into Spike Lee. So you met them when you were still at college. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, one when I was 20 and one when I was 21. Yep, yeah, in
Okay.
2019.
So then now you're working as a playwright, and then I wanted to ask a little bit more about the Spike Lee situation because obviously that comes up a lot online, right?
And Spike was teaching a screenwriting seminar where there were about 10 of us in the class. It was an amazing way to spend a second semester of his senior year of college, because we would read a screenplay and watch a movie every week. And Spike would come up from Brooklyn on Fridays, and we would discuss the movie and discuss the screenplay, and then conference call either the writer, director, or lead actor from the movie,
Wow.
which was just incredible. So Spike provided that access, and then at some point during that semester, towards the end of the semester, probably, he offered me an internship to come work for him in Brooklyn, and for that summer. So I accepted that, and that really brought me to New York and brought me to Brooklyn, Fort Greene. He was shooting the movie Clockers that summer,
Oh yeah.
and it was the first time I had ever been on a movie set, and I got to go to dailies and just got to experience movies, which I had never had that previously. And I didn't study film as an undergrad; it was playwriting and plays. So it was an exposure to film that I had never had before.
Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to ask about too, is because you kind of went to school for playwriting, right? And so, but then of course, this meeting with Spike Lee sort of changed the trajectory of your career a little bit. Did you think, was that always part of it too, or that you wanted to do TV and film, or was it plays, and then that just sort of happened organically through this meeting?
Yeah, well, it was for me. It was playwriting was the epitome,
Yeah, yeah.
and then it was film, and then it was television. And my senior year, there was a show that premiered called NYPD Blue.
Yeah, yeah, of
And the
course.
first season of NYPD Blue, which I was watching the fall of 1993, and I was just mesmerized and really blown away by the level of writing, which was David Milch and Stephen Bochco, I think, and the level of acting, which was Dennis Franz
Yeah.
and David Caruso, and the directing. The whole thing was just really, it's what got me excited about television, that television could be something alive and different and edgy and really emotionally engaging every week, a level of storytelling that was emotionally engaging. So I was writing plays, and then the opportunity arose with Spike to go work from in Brooklyn. And Spike ended up hiring me to adapt a play that I had written for my thesis into a screenplay for him.
Wow.
So that was right out of college. And then that ended up not going anywhere because his deal with his studio fell apart. And that's when I then went back to saying, hey, I want to, after working on that screenplay for 10 months and not getting it made, I realized I need to see things get made. And that's what brought my
Mm,
attention to television drama. Yeah.
got it. Okay, so let's jump to Sopranos because we could go on and on about the early years, and I want to get to some big hitters here, right? So let's set the stage for the audience. 2000, 2001. You've now, and you already answered my other question about when did you move to New York. So I got it now. You're in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
You of course work on season 2 and 3. And let me just set the stage for everybody. I mean, everybody knows Sopranos. It's 92% on the tomato meter, 96% on the popcorn meter, because I'm a Rotten Tomatoes guy. It's a top 5 Wally Report show of all time, and it's on everybody's top, maybe number one to two, but with that and Breaking Bad. If people have somehow do not, of course it was on HBO. If people somehow do not know, it's all James Gandolfini, Edie Falco. It's all about a gangster who also is kind of going to see a shrink, if you will, and then there's amazing characters and things like that. Now, how do you go from what you were just telling me to landing this gig?
Well, it goes back to NYPD Blue. So I had written a script of NYPD Blue just on my own. It's called On Spec, which is really on speculation that someone might read it, on speculation that someone might want to buy it, on speculation that you might get a job. So it's spec is short for just writing a script on your own where no one's paying you. And I wrote that script, and then I wrote a script for another show at the time, which I had seen was a medical show. Sent it off to Los Angeles to agencies are the gatekeepers to get jobs. This is going back quite a while. I think it's mostly the same thing still. The agencies responded favorably, and I was able to get an agent. And then they set me up on a bunch of meetings. So I came out from New York to have these meetings. I ended up working on 2 shows prior to The Sopranos. And then I was not particularly happy working on those kind of shows. And
Mm.
The Sopranos in 1990, at the fall of 1997, I got a call to meet with David Chase when there was only a pilot of The Sopranos. David Chase created The
Oh wow.
Sopranos. And
Yes,
I
yes.
flew out to Los Angeles after working on my first television series as just a junior writer, and met with David and really was impressed with what The Sopranos was. And this is before HBO is what it is today. This is going back a long time, almost 30 years, I guess, 1997. And
Wow, yeah.
and so I did not get hired to write for the first season, but because I was just interested in the show, I asked if David would send me scripts as he was writing it, which he did. And then the first season, they made it and it was airing. And David called me up and asked if I would come in to interview to potentially write for season 2.
Okay, so Todd, so you've met David Chase. He's asked you to come and interview now. For it's into the ending of season 1, which is obviously probably already a success on TV, and now he's come to you to ask you for interview for season 2 and beyond. Can you tell us how that went?
Well, the first season was still airing, so my memory is that it was maybe like 8 episodes had aired of the first season, and people were discovering it, which is a thing that's really rare these days, but still happens, where word of mouth happens and people start watching the show. So David called and asked if I would meet, and then it was an opportunity to write an episode as a trial for the show. So that was an episode that I wrote that I ended up we ended up making, which is an episode called D-Girl in season 2, where Jon Favreau, who's now become a very well-known director, but at
Yeah.
the time was an actor, and he comes to New Jersey to do some research about the mob and is introduced to Christopher, played by Michael Imperioli. So it was a very fun episode, the likes of which the show hadn't really done prior to that, which is to have kind of breaking the wall, so to speak, about the mob stories, and have someone from Hollywood come and want to use one of the characters in the show as a source of authenticity and research for a story that he was looking to, I think a movie that he was looking to direct, and a fictional movie that he was looking to direct.
Got it. So I love that you brought up David Chase because I had some questions about him. I just watched Wise Guy, right? That new doc on
Sure.
HBO. I'm sure you probably watched it. I always saw his name, up on the screen. I always heard David Chase this or David Chase that, but I never knew his personality. I never knew what a intense guy that he was. So I just wanted to ask you, because you were in that crazy writer's room, if you will. What was it like working for David and now that you're hired, now you're on, a bunch of season 2 and into season 3, what was that, environment like?
Well, it really changed my life in so many ways. And David is extremely intelligent and can be very funny. He was writing a show that he was very passionate about. I think he's maybe is around my age now. I think still a little bit older than I am now when he was in that moment. And he had worked in network television for a long time and wanted to do something that was breaking with a lot of conventions of network television. And that was something that was very exciting for me as someone. When I met him, I was 25. I start work on the show when I'm 26. And I was very young compared to everyone else. So I think it was like 13 or 14 years younger than the nearest writer.
Wow.
And a writer named Terry Winter and I started together and shared an office together. Terry went on to be on The Sopranos for its entire run from that moment forward, and then went on to create Boardwalk Empire and many other shows. And I just realized there was a huge amount to learn and to really benefit from the experiences of people who had been working in this medium for a long time. And it was really a fulfillment of my desire when I started in television, which is I wanted to see things get made. And one of the great things about TV drama is you have the opportunity to make things and then also learn from a previous generation, which came to be. So the experience changed my life, and I learned a tremendous amount and was there for 2 seasons, close to 2 seasons, and then was able to create my own shows after that.
Yeah, so real quick, last couple, because we could do a whole show just on Sopranos, but
Sure.
I'm sure there was like an amazing feeling of working on such a critically acclaimed show. So you must have had these highs, but then there must have also been like the pressure that came with that to deliver the next amazing episode. So can you just like tell us just quickly how did you sort of navigate those highs, and I don't know about lows, but you know what I mean, the up
Yeah.
and down feelings of that?
Well, a perfect example of that, I think, is when I was writing the first episode as a trial. That David asked me to write an episode as a trial, so I had 3 weeks to write the episode. And the first week I spent just watching every episode of the 13 of the first season 3 times. So
Mm.
I spent the first week just trying to get the voices of the characters. So I watched, there were 13 hours, and I turned that into 39 hours of viewing. And then and I was outlining, and then the second week I started writing. And towards the end of the second week of my writing period, the New York Times wrote an article calling The Sopranos the greatest work of popular culture of the last quarter century. And as I'm trying to write my trial episode, so
Wow.
that
Yeah.
was that was an experience unlike any I had ever had or will ever have, where it's been lauded as that. Yeah.
Got it. So now, as you mentioned, having this amazing experience kind of got you into the next level of making your own show. So before I have more questions on, let's jump to Damages. We're going to jump all the way
Sure.
to 2007 to 2012 on FX. 91% tomato meter, 88% popcorn meter. It's a Wally Report top 50 show of all time. Now, for the people who haven't seen this, definitely get on it. And Todd, on one of my earlier episodes, I talked about this. Yes, there was an amazing shows during the Sopranos era, but I talked about this golden age period of television, which I cite from about 2007 to 2020. Okay, and so this was right at that new period of amazing television coming out on all these different networks. For people who haven't seen this, it is stars Glenn Close, Rose Byrne, Tate Donovan, and then you have amazing, guests, Ted Danson, William Hurt, Martin Short throughout the different seasons, amongst many others, right? And for people who don't know what this show is about, she is a high stakes litigator going, in high level class action lawsuits against white collar crime. That's sort of the summary of what's going on here. But there's just amazing writing, and you even won a bunch of the show won a bunch of Emmys. So before we get to all of that, I just wanted to set the stage for the listeners, because if you haven't seen Damages, get it on your list. Now, what's the transition from Sopranos to this? How do you go from working on a hit show to saying, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to create my own amazing universe and world and show? And obviously, you left Sopranos in 2001. Damages, so it's like a 6-year journey. How do you kind of take this to now? I want to create my own show.
Sure. Well, my experience on The Sopranos, there's a long story to be told about that, but that's been covered in other in other areas.
Yeah.
But when I left The Sopranos, when I left The Sopranos, I ended up working with another. I wanted to create my own shows, but an opportunity came up to work with the director Michael Mann. And so I did a series with him in Los Angeles, which was inspired by his movie called Heat. And I learned
Which I love, of course.
Learned a tremendous amount of about Los Angeles, and just also about furthering a filmic vision for a series. David's desire was to have Sopranos not feel like a television show, but really feel filmic, and HBO allowed for that because there were no commercials. So this is going back to a time where that was new. Now it's different on the streamers because there aren't commercials in that same way. So I worked with Michael Mann, and then I created my first series, which was directed by the pilot was directed by Catherine Bigelow.
Hurt Locker. Sorry.
Hurt Locker.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And Point Break, and
Wow.
many other movies. But so that series ended up not going forward. That was for Fox, and coming out of the experience at Fox Network, I felt like, you know what, I need to do something that's really fully my own. The one with Catherine was based on an article, and I had a desire to create a series, and ended up co-creating it with my brother Glenn and a long-term friend Daniel Zellman, which was Damages, very much inspired by my experiences in the entertainment industry, working for egomaniacal, ruthless, paranoid people,
Yeah.
and working for them and with them, and poured all of that into Glenn Close's character. And so her character is a high stakes litigator. I didn't want to write about the entertainment industry, but she takes on a young protege in the character of Rose Byrne, or played by Rose Byrne. And the question is, will she train her protege to be better than her eventually, or will she eventually feel so threatened ego-wise that she will try to destroy her
Wow.
protege? And from the Rose Byrne character point of view, it was, what price success, and how far are you willing to go for your ambition? And will you sacrifice your personal life and your morals to achieve the level of ambition that lives inside of you?
So speaking of Glenn Close, you're now casting for this show. Okay, this is a big deal for you. You get Glenn and Ted Danson. You must have been pumped. What were these initial feelings of like, holy shit, I just got some heavy duty, amazing actors to roll this new show out?
Well, it was really thrilling. Went in to sell the show to only one place, which was FX, and the John Landgraf, who's the head of FX, bought the show in the room and asked if we would
Wow.
be willing to meet with Glenn Close because she had done a season of The Shield for FX,
Of course,
and
which I saw. Okay, yeah, I saw all of the Shield. That makes sense. Sorry, continue.
and yep, and I guess John had a good experience working with her. And she had told John that she would be open if John ever had a series to bring to her. So we sell the series or a pilot to John, and John asked if we'd be willing to meet with Glenn. So we flew to New York and met with Glenn and had a great 2 or 3 hour meeting with her. And she said that she'd be happy to read the script when we had it finished. And so a couple months later, we had the script finished and sent it to her. And it was a very smooth process because she read the script and said that she was in.
Wow.
Uh, and so, in addition to then having to cast basically her nemesis for that first season, which was Ted Danson, we also had to cast her staff and the protege. So we spent a long time trying to find the protege, which ended up being Rose Byrne, which was amazing. And then Glenn's character's right hand was an actor named Tate Donovan, who was just extraordinary in his ability to play duplicitousness. And so he was going to be the kind of the handler of Rose Byrne's character, but meanwhile was Patty Hughes, Glenn Close's character's right hand, and so was very much aware of the double dealings that he had to walk this tightrope. And Tate was on the show for 3 seasons and was incredibly inspiring to write for, as was Glenn and Rose and Ted Danson in that first season. And also an actor named Željko Ivanek, who ended up also winning the Emmy with Glenn Close that first
Right.
season. So it was a really inspiring to write for all of them, as was each season of Damages. But we felt very lucky, and even while it was going on, extremely lucky that the stars, literally not just in the sky but in the pantheon of Hollywood, were aligning to work with us.
And I love that you brought up Tate and Rose because those are going to be my next question. So Tate obviously was a key role because, and I just watched a bunch of season 1 to give you fresh for this show. And I did notice like you needed someone to almost have this calming effect around because Glenn is so intense and you need a right-hand man to just be able to kind of do all these different things she needs. And Tate was very like calm and then also, yes, kind of working on the side with Rose. So it was a key character in my eyes. And then the other thing, finding Rose Byrne. I mean, she had been in Troy and a couple other things, but she wasn't obviously the superstar that she is now. So that to me was another like amazing job of casting because she's just so I just love Rose, and so that was just such an amazing job finding those two.
Yeah, and it was also, I mean, absolutely there, and the combination of personalities, both on screen and off screen, we all really got along, and we've all remained friends, which is rare in these situations. And people were really about the work, and then also we were able to relate to one another outside of the work. So that was great. But in terms of the level of acting that they all brought, Glenn is someone who really sets the tone for the entire crew and the other actors, and had a desire to also engage with Rose in ways of, as a character, bringing her character along, but also as an actor, looking out for one another. So Glenn was extraordinary, and it's long hours, and she didn't bat an eye at working at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and
Wow.
as the schedules would require. And yeah, I mean, it was an extraordinary experience. And Glenn went on to win 2 Emmys and a Golden Globe. Rose was nominated. Jelko and Ted were nominated, and not that the awards are the
Right.
they're just awards. When I say that, I mean it's important business wise, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the work is lasting. But to get the recognition helps us to be able to continue to work and tell more of stories that we want to tell.
Yeah, and so that was my actual thought here was you're the showrunner here. Having this type of success must have been amazing, right? Because it's your first big show. Not only you get the critical acclaim, but you have actors winning Emmys. So my question for you here is when you have actors winning Emmys, how amazing is that feeling? I guess you kind of talked about it there, but do you just feel this amazing sense of pride or vindication, or what is that like?
I don't think it's more pride, and I co-ran the show with my brother Glenn and with Daniel Zellman, and so the three of us, we didn't really have a sense of, I don't think there was vindication. It was more just that we were doing work that we believed in and that was exciting to us and inspiring to us, and then to have it be recognized. And at the
Yeah.
time, the kind of storytelling that we were putting out into the world hadn't been done in the same way quite before. Now it's become copied, and it feels somewhat cliche to start stories halfway through and then do a flashback in a season, because you couldn't really do that on network television in the way that we were doing it. So now it's been copied a lot, and I think that if people just go to Damages and watch it, out of sequence all these years later, they may feel like, oh, well, we've kind of seen some of this structure of storytelling, not the character, but the structure. But at the time, it was very new.
Yeah, and I actually had a question about that because in you have that device of you kind of see the end, right? And then you tell the story and you kind of flash between the present and the past and you throughout the show. What you also do in the Bloodline, which we're about to get into in a second.
Right.
That became almost your signature move, if you will. Where did that come about in your experience?
I think it really comes from being able to approach storytelling. For Damages, we had 13 episodes for the first 3 seasons, each season, which is very different than a network show where you would have 22 or 24. So Sopranos was 13, but it allowed us to look at the whole season as one story. Shows like Law and Order are a different kind of storytelling. They can do 22, 24 episodes, but it's not serialized storytelling. So we were trying to take advantage of what this new form, quote unquote, that Sopranos ushered in, and then also tell it as a thriller. So we were in the Damages, very much it was a legal thriller where there aren't that many scenes in the courtroom, at least in the first couple seasons. And so in order to make it provocative and exciting, one tool was to be able to start at a crisis moment deeper in, and then show this, which doesn't something that is Rose Byrne's character running bloody through the streets
Yeah.
of Manhattan, and then say 6 months earlier, and she's a lawyer interviewing for a job. It's like, well, how is that going to unfold?
Yeah.
So it was a tool to tell a story. If you just started with her as a lawyer interviewing for a job, it may feel a little too dry to capture the attention.
Yeah, no, it works. It's very interesting. It heightens, the excitement and the tension and just, everything more, you're more engaged.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's jump to Bloodline here. I do want to say, okay, so Damages goes on for 5 seasons, if I'm correct, right? You have a
Yeah.
long run, critical, success, and a lot of Emmys. We talked about this, so that must feel great. And then you're like, oh my God, okay, I got to start new and now do my next thing. So we're going to jump to 2015 through 2017 on Netflix, which is also kind of a change here because now we're going to like from FX to a streaming platform. Just to set the stage for everybody. Season 1, 81% on the tomato meter, 89 on the popcorn meter. Now, this is a top 20, 30 all-time show on the Wally Report, I got to say. Well, I'll get into this in a second, but I'm a huge Bloodline guy. So uh, summary of the show. It takes place in the Keys, which I have a question on in a second, right? So you're totally changing your environments and locations here. It's about a sort of a wealthy family that owns this hotel in this area, and then there's a lot of drama with all the family and the kids, especially the old eldest brother, which has just come home and shakes things up, right? So Kyle Chandler, Linda Cardellini, Sam Shepard, Ben Mendelsohn, Sissy Spacek, so another great cast. So before I get into my questions here, I just got to say I'm a huge fan. Just rewatched almost all of season one. Fucking
Yeah.
love the show. It's fantastic, right? So for people, listeners who have not seen Bloodline, get it on your list. It just, I'm so immersed again. I might have to watch the entire thing, just so you know. It's just great work all around. So my first question is back to the Keys. How do you go from a lot of New York, right? Sopranos, Damages, other stuff you were working on, to saying, you know what, screw it, I'm going to completely shake this up. How did the Florida Keys become sort of like a new location world for you, if you
Yeah.
will?
Well, the story itself was based on, or centered around, not based on, but centered on a family that had a hotel, and the kids grew up as in the hotel, and their parents ran the hotel. And so we were looking for an environment where we could set it that felt like it had an identity, and it also felt somewhat isolating, that it wasn't so easy to yeah, it felt isolating. That's the
Mm,
easiest way to say it. So we were looking around the country and different states of where there were locations that were isolating, and we considered Hawaii. We considered some of the Outer Banks islands off of North Carolina, something in Georgia. I remember something even on Long Island.
mm,
And I remembered when I was in high school meeting a guy. I went to a summer program and met a guy who had told me, he was older. He was one of the counselors, and I was playing a lot of basketball, and he told me a story about how his father had been down to the Florida Keys, and it always stuck in my mind. I had never been down there, and it just sounded interesting. And so, at some point, when we were just starting, into the search, I said, "Well, why don't we check out the Florida Keys? I've never been." And we went down there, and it felt very fitting for what we were trying to do. Not Key West, which is all the way south. It's the furthest key from Miami, but we were up in what's called the Upper Keys, so Key
mm,
Largo, Isla Morada. And the irony, of course, is that we filmed the series down there, and I had fallen out of touch with that guy, but he came through New York, and we met for a breakfast um, while we were like filming the second season of the show, I think. And I said to him, I guess I have you to thank, because he was saying how much he liked it. And I said, I have you to thank for the location. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, all those years ago, and when I was in high school, you told me your dad had moved to the Florida Keys. And he just looked at me, he's like, I never told you that. My dad never lived in the.
so
So
you had the story wrong, or?
so I have the story wrong. To this day, I have no idea who told me about. I mean, maybe it was someone in that same period, but I have no idea who it was. Um,
Wow.
so it just then becomes a random thing, that the show. But the setting of Florida, especially the Keys and the environment, and what we were hoping to get from the environment, infusing a whole level of pressure and isolation, really fed the show. And Ben Mendelsohn's character was extraordinary, as was Kyle Chandler. All of them. Ben ended up winning the
Yeah.
Emmy for the show. Kyle was nominated for a couple seasons, but bringing in the Florida Keys and the texture of that was very exciting, because it was a place none of us had ever been, and we were able to really tell a story down there that hadn't been not much had been shot since Flipper, which was a show that was before my time, but about a
Yeah.
dolphin, and our show was very different than
Well,
that.
yeah. I mean, it works because you even like as a viewer, you almost like want to be part of that. You're like, I want to go down there, want to be part of that world, right?
Yeah.
And so here was an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up that I noticed right off when I just rewatched the first couple episodes. That the music that you're using sets an amazing tone right away. It's kind of like it's breathtaking, almost. So it made me think. especially because you're the creator, you have to think about all these different things, right? You're not just the actor or the director or something like that. How do you who do you work with and decide on the music to set the tone for those first couple episodes of the show? How does that get decided?
Well, it gets decided by me working on it, and with we have a composer that I did. We did 5 seasons of Damages together, named Jimmy Levine, and so then we worked with Jimmy on Bloodline as well, and also a music supervisor who we did all of Damages and Bloodline, and then the new show, The New Look, and Jimmy was
Hmm.
the composer on The New Look as well. I mean, it's a very integral part to the storytelling.
Yes.
Typically there are two types of so there's source music and then score. Source music is from records that exist, like what could be referred to as needle drop, and
Hmm.
then score is music that's written specifically for the show. And Jimmy was the composer, and has been my composer. We've collaborated now for 9 seasons of shows. And we have a shorthand, and we bring in influences and really spend a lot of time discussing and trying out and sitting in a studio and exchanging files. And for me, and Jimmy and Mark, it's a way to augment the storytelling and increase emotional impact, without it
Yeah.
feeling like you're being manipulated.
Right.
So, and there's a fine line between that, because you could have someone riding up in an elevator and it's just quiet, and you could have them riding up an elevator and it's super tense with a score. You could have them riding up in an elevator and they smile and there's some lighthearted thing. There's
Yeah.
you can change it and then undercut it and influence the emotional impact very easily. But also the audience can then lose uh, their inherent or their implicit trust of the storytelling if you use a very tense musical cue and then you don't deliver on it, or you make it into a comedy and you feel like you've been manipulated in not a great way. So it's something that, in working together, it's a hugely important part of storytelling.
Yeah, well, I noticed it especially watching it. So I knew I wanted to ask you because you get to decide all these cool things behind the scenes. Speaking of Ben Mendelsohn, rewatching this, maybe I'm sure I noticed it when I first watched it, but especially he creates such tension in these awkward scenes in season one with the whole thing with Meg and the hotel into the rooms, and then the scene with Sam with his father when he's trying to pay him off with the check. I just was like so tense. I was like, oh my God, these just what do you have to? I mean, is he just as a director working on some of these scenes? Is there anything that you have to do during these scenes to create that unbelievable tension, or do you just let the actors go to work and you've hired someone who can deliver that way?
It's a great question, and I think it's a combination of both. I mean, um, primarily it's the actors creating the environment for me where an actor feels uh, safe enough to be vulnerable is the job that I see as my job, and to try to encourage them to take chances and do things that they're surprising themselves. And that if it doesn't work, we won't use it. But there's a chance that if it does work, it can be really exciting. So
Mm.
to create an environment where something can happen, but it's the actor is doing it. I'm not a director who tells actors how to say lines, or I may offer ideas of things that occurred to me or whoever's written the episode that we can talk about as like a fertilizer for the actor to use or not use. But in production, it's always a challenge because you never have enough time, and you never have enough money. So, but the actors, I don't want the actors to know that there isn't enough time.
Mm.
So I may have a sense that I only have 20 seconds to get this scene, or one more take, but I want the actor to feel like they have as much time as, meanwhile, there's a huge, like, a huge weight right here saying that's it, but you can't let the actor know that. So And sometimes those last takes can be the most amazing. Sometimes the first take can be the most amazing. Or
Interesting.
you end up using parts of both. So
Yeah, because I just definitely felt a lot of those scenes. He has a way of really like, making them just very tense and awkward and accusatory. So I just got to say, rewatching season one, it's just so cleverly written. And it's also, maybe I'm older now, I'm a little bit more mature watching this, but the story is so damn brutal and kind of heartbreaking with the sister and with Danny and just with everything. But just an amazing, impressive piece of work, I gotta say.
thank you.
So for people who haven't seen this, get it on your list right away. Now, I want to get to your new show. Okay, the New Look came out this year, early in the year on Apple TV Plus. For people that don't know, Ben Mendelsohn's coming back, Juliette Binoche, also John Malkovich, and I haven't finished it yet, but I'm on like episode 8. I wanted to get
Yeah.
as many in before. I just got where Glenn Close has shown up. And I also got to say, Emily Mortimer she's kind of fantastic in this too, as just like a great addition to kind of hanging out, with the Coco Chanel story. So, real quick here, I've noticed as you've gone along with your career, you're now like the first episode comes on and I'm viewing, and now I see you're executive producer, creator, writer, director. How the fuck like do you manage all these roles? Like, I guess would be my first question on this. Like, isn't it intense to have to pull all of that off at sort of one time?
Well, I would say it is intense. I think one of the benefits of doing this for a long time and having done several different seasons and series is to try to bring people along with me that I get along with and collaborate well with. So on the New Look, my line producer, who's someone who handles budgets, but is much more than that, and Damages, I did 5 seasons of Damages with him, 3 seasons of Bloodline, and then we're tackling the New Look, which is the first series that is shot not in the United States that I've done. So it was shot entirely in Paris and in France. And it's also a period show, which I hadn't done a period show before, set in the 1940s. It starts during World War II, Nazi occupied Paris. And who's now an executive producer with me, but Mark Baker is someone who is able to help facilitate production. I also worked with Jimmy Levine again as a composer, and Mark White, who's a music supervisor, and Jaime Reynoso, who is a director of photography that I worked with on Bloodline for 3 seasons. So the more writing, creating, directing, executive producing a series, by the time I've gotten to that place, I'm working with many people repeatedly, in addition to actors that I've worked with prior. So Ben and Glenn Close, and then being met with great talent of Juliette Binoche and Maisie Williams and John Malkovich and Emily Mortimer. So it feels like there's a tremendous amount of pressure, but at the same time, we're all in it together, which is a great way to approach something. Also, the New Look was the first series that I created without my previous partners from Bloodline and Damages, so that was a new experience as well. And it was an incredible moment to tell a story that was very personal to me. This story about creation as survival and the unknown Christian Dior during World War II and the Nazi occupation, and the very famous Coco Chanel at that time, and what they both did under the Nazi occupation in order to survive. They took very different paths to survival.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild story. I don't know if you know, but I was a history major in college, and of course, most history majors are big World War II era, fanatics, if you will. So the time period was amazing. It was a joy to watch. And like, my question is this: thinking about a period piece, you're dealing with all wardrobe now, and old cars and old buildings, and you hadn't done that before. How much of a challenge is that to keep up with all of that on top of the stuff you're already thinking about? Was that going to tear your hair out type stuff, or
If
is
I
it just like amazing when you get it?
No, it was very, again, with budgets and with time and everything, and working with amazing production designer and costume designer and people who, in explaining, as an example, for me, a lot of period pieces, they all feel too new. They all feel the clothes are all too new. The
Mm,
haircuts are new. The people will step on the set, or you watch them, and a lot of the audience may not care about it. But especially during Nazi occupied Paris, I wanted things to feel lived in. So there's a scene that begins, or close to the beginning of this season, first episode, where Christian Dior, way after the war, is speaking at the Sorbonne, which was incredible because he actually did speak at the Sorbonne, which is a university in Paris, in 1955. We actually shot on the same stage where he spoke, which is very rare to be able to get permission to film there. And we had 500 extras, our background actors, filling the seats. And it was very important to me that obviously they all need to be dressed in wardrobe that is fitting for 1955. But it was important to me that people felt more real. So, as an example, we had all of the background actors come in 2 weeks prior to filming to get haircuts.
wow.
So, period haircuts. So that way their hair could grow in a little bit and didn't feel like everyone in the audience just stepped out of the hair and makeup trailer. And it's
Right.
those kind of details which are very, for me, also the wardrobe itself was something that gave me a lot of anxiety because I have no ability in wardrobe and sewing. Um,
Yeah.
but I was met with, a tremendous talent of Karen Sarow, who was nominated for an Emmy for this season for
Wow.
costume design. Um, and, people bringing their lifelong passion and dedication to the work. So,
Yeah, it's definitely noticeable. Even some of the old cars, and in the latest episode I just watched with spats coming out of that old car, and it was dirty because and that I was like, oh my God, what model is that? But so okay, a couple final comments here. One is I just got to say, and I don't know whose idea this was, but I loved what you did with in period pieces. This usually doesn't happen. So let's say a famous figure gets introduced in a scene, you guys have sort of like a digital title that comes next to them, which for big people, it's not neat if it's like Frank Sinatra. But I liked how you did that because not everybody knows all these different, and that sort of set the tone. So that was kind of, I got to say, that was really cool. I like whoever
oh,
thought of
nice.
that. Great work on that. And then just because you're a big time writer, I just got to call out two lines that I like throughout the series. Oh, yes, here we go. The rich and sexy always come out on top. That was a that was a big one. It's kind of, but I like that when they're celebrating right after the war, right? And then the other one that I might actually use now is an eternity is a small price to pay for perfection, which I thought was really good too. That was another great line when they're talking about how much perfect the garment, if you will. So final thing here when you're working again, and you mentioned it with Ben Mendelsohn and Glenn Close again now for the second time. What is that like as a showrunner and creator to be able to work with them on multiple projects?
It's really, I think, one of life's, for me, greatest pleasures, because we have a relationship, we have previous characters and stories that we've explored, and now we're bringing our desire to work together into a new character, a new story. And it feels like the previous characters, the previous stories are all layers of almost foundation. It's like a bedrock that you can then go even further into characters and storytelling because you have this great foundation. So, my desire is and even in future projects, is to find an actor. As I've explained previously, it's working with director photographer that I've worked with before, production designer, costume designer. I've met on the new look two great people in those departments, that I would love to work with again in France. Um, and the experience is, how do I say it? It's very fulfilling and just a
Mm,
heart sense to work with people repeatedly. And as an
yeah.
example, on Bloodline, Tate Donovan, who I met on Damages, also had a desire to direct, and so we he had the opportunity to direct on Damages, and then on Bloodline, there wasn't a role for him as an actor, but he came on to direct. So that was fantastic to share that with him. And yeah, so the idea to work with people repeatedly is something that is very rewarding and really, for me, is an emotional engagement that is very exciting to be able to achieve.
Cool. So, and I did talk with Tate about that too, because I'm such a big Bloodline guy. So I went on Tate's episode. I did ask him, okay, what is it like when you're coming onto a show as a director, with a whole new cast around you? So yeah, that was awesome. Now, okay, final question, and then we'll do our outro and dance to the music one more time. Here is, what is next in your career now, right? Like, are you working on anything? Is there a dream project? Like, how do you kind of, keep moving to the next project?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, what's next for me is I'm writing a movie that I hope to direct, a small movie uh, back in France, set in 1925, about a road trip that Hemingway and Fitzgerald took when they were in their 20s,
Wow.
which is hilarious and heartbreaking and inspiring and um, not at all what I think people who know the names Hemingway and Fitzgerald would expect. They were in their 20s, and they had a long friendship where they influenced one another. So that would be something in France. And then I have two new series that I'm working on. One is a comedy, hopefully to be shot here in New York. And it's with someone, an actor potentially that I worked with on Damages. In a season, and then also a whole music component of a producer and musician named Jack Antonoff, who I worked with on The New Look, who did the covers to end each episode of period songs. So we're
Wow.
continuing that relationship. And then a whole other adventure based series, which is a drama, but more of like an action drama, character action drama, and the thriller that I'm very excited about. So we'll
Wow.
see. I mean, you never
Okay.
know. It could be something else other than those three, but
Yeah.
that's what's happening in this moment on October, 2024. So
Nice. Well, keep me posted as always. If you need me to read stuff early, I'm your guy, secret scripts, or I'll make sure to get them. Everything that you come out will be blasted on the show.
I think
So,
first and foremost, though, I'm working on
yes.
lyrics for the Wally Report theme
Oh,
song. So yes,
well, look, we're about to listen to it again in a second, so you can vibe out one more time. But I like that you're into it. So, and thanks for coming on. This has been unbelievable. I've been able to ask you some stuff about those great shows we haven't talked about yet before. So, just here's my little quick outro. Thank you for listening to the Wally Report, the world's hottest podcast. Please subscribe, follow, comment, like, share, and blast. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, and we're heavy on the gram at the Wally Report. That's at the Wally Report. We've actually been posting about new hot shows, like maybe Todd will be coming out with shortly on our page with fresh videos and other content, so don't miss out. And please make sure to comment on Spotify. We love the comments and interactions with the fans. So with that, let me just cue up our dance track one last time. Thank you so much. You are the man for coming on.